Well, hello again. And now we are going to discuss chapter 5 on the discussion. In my opinion, this can be the tricky part at the moment because the findings is just to report the findings. For example, the quant, you already have everything. We did it in the workshop. The qual is the same. You did it in the workshop. You already know what happened. You already have your data structure. You are done. You only need to report. But the discussion, maybe you don't have it yet, like finished. Because remember, we have a lecture on this. Is the last lecture, lecture 4, I think, on the theorizing. The discussion is the section or the chapter of your assignment and your thesis where you overlap the findings, the empirical material you collected with the literature, with previous research. So you need to present your theoretical contributions. And as I said in the lecture, it's difficult to identify what is a theoretical contribution. So my suggestion is that in this chapter, you start with a section called Theoretical Contributions, where you uh, write one paragraph for each of your theoretical contributions. I think that you will probably have two theoretical contributions, one with the quant and one with the qual. And probably, but it's not mandatory, I think, you might have a third one with the overlap of the two, of the quant and the qual. But let's assume that you want to discuss only two, one from quant and one from qual. So let's again, you need to watch this lecture. If you didn't come to the lecture, it's already in videos. So think about what is important for the literature that can be learned from what you have done. Maybe in your hypothesis, you stated financial stress is important for the happiness of students. So if you tested that quantitatively and it doesn't work, you do not support, I think you can have a contribution from there. You can say like, we previously believed that with this and these articles that you already discussed in the literature review mentioned that financial stress will affect negatively maybe, but we tested and it doesn't work. So why it doesn't work is what you maybe have to discuss in here. Like maybe these previous studies are maybe assuming or are defining happiness in a way that is not like you. So our definition is much more psychological. It's not really that objective. It's more subjective. So maybe you can discuss that. Like maybe previous research focused on a happiness that it's very objective. Like if they have enough money to live or something like that. We actually have a more subjective kind of happiness. I'm just making up things. I have no idea if that works or not. Because then I will try to give you the same example, but on the opposite way. What if you actually find results that support your hypothesis? What if actually financial stress affects negatively happiness? Then you will be like, oh, I don't have a contribution because it's too boring. I just did exactly the same as the theory will suggest. Theory will suggest they will be sad, and they are sad. But don't be like that. Try to discuss like what will these findings mean. Then you can exploit, for example, your context, and then you can say this research was in the US, where there are many things that are different compared to Sweden. And in Sweden, we will assume that financial stress wouldn't be that relevant because in general, there are mechanisms that can help you if you are struggling. So it is quite surprising that the hypothesis works in Sweden. So it's kind of a bit strange that you can have a discussion wherever it happens, but you need to train this. So do it like that. Also, if your quantitative findings are partial support, partial reject, or contradictory findings, I guess it will be easier to do the discussion because then the quantitative findings show you that it's more complex than only positive or negative. It becomes positive under certain controls and certain variables in the model, but then it becomes negative in another way, or then the model doesn't work. It gives you hints that maybe this process is more complex than we expected and that maybe previous literature has assumed. So I guess no matter the result, you can still find a way to kind of discuss and move forward what we already know. That is for the first paragraph, the quant result. And I think maybe here I can be a bit confused. It can be a bit confusing for you because I have 5.1 and then the hypothesis. In reality, it will be more like 5.2.1, I guess. 5.5. 5.2.1, because that is the first paragraph of the discussion, the quantitative the quantitative discussion. What would accepting or rejecting the hypothesis or contradictory findings or anything would mean for the literature? So I hope with the video it's clear, but what I mean with hypothesis is that first paragraph discussing the quantitative results. And then in 5.3, I have framework as the title of the section, but in reality is the qualitative discussion. I told you that in the qualitative findings in here, you will probably need to discuss the concepts that you already previously identified, plus maybe something new. Maybe you found a new concept and you want to include it in here. And also, and I think it's important that besides discussing each concept, also you discuss how they are connected. So again, in this example, the financial happiness and stress is maybe explained by a combination of well-being plus social media impact plus peer pressure. I'm just making up different concepts. Maybe in this discussion, do not only focus on the findings like this we found this is how it works, but also try to overlap it with the previous literature. Has previous literature identified a relationship, for example, between well-being and financial stress and peer pressure or social media? Can you identify links that were previously not linked? Maybe in there discuss that. You can say like, this article previously identified that social media will be relevant, and this article discussed that well-being will be relevant. But when you put them together, we don't really see that in the previous literature. It's a bit isolated. When we found in our interviews is that actually they are very connected. This informs this. Social media affects well-being, affecting happiness. So try to discuss in a way like that. That's why I call it framework, because maybe your qualitative findings can end up with an improved theoretical framework. So try to maybe discuss the qualitative findings in that way, that you end up with an improved version of your framework. You actually explain more than previously was being said. So again, I hope that this chapter 5 is not confusing, because I have like the 5.1 theoretical contributions, and then I have hypothesis and framework. But again, remember, I guess the whole discussion can be maybe 2 paragraphs, minimum 2 paragraphs, one where you discuss the quant implications to the theory from your findings. So if you support or reject, what does that mean? And the second paragraph on the qualitative findings. So based on what you have learned, how does it look like? Is this concept still in here? Did you bring something new? So maybe you present the improved framework in here in 5.3. So that's the discussion. And then the next video will talk about the conclusion, but I can tell you it's much simpler. Discussion is a bit difficult.